welcome to Little Cinderella Child, and this video is a book review of The Love Child by Edith Olivier. This book was first published in 1927 but has recently been republished by the British Library as part of their British Library Women Writers series, and this video is in collaboration with the British Library. It's part of their blog tour for this book and 3 other recent releases that have come out as part of this series. If you want to check out what other reviewers have thought of these new releases, well, re-releases, then go and check out the British Library's social media pages and you can read other people's thoughts and feelings on these 4 books. So Edith was born in 1872 and she was the last of 10 children. She had no formal schooling, but she did end up winning a scholarship to go to Oxford University, which she did, in which she met and dined with Lewis Carroll, of course, then became the writer of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And it wasn't until her 50s that Edith started writing. She wrote about a year and a half after the death of her sister. And when you read this book, you can see where some influences of her sister's passing came from, because The Love Child starts with a story of grief. So we meet our main character, Agatha, on page 1 when she is at the funeral of her mother. She's at the graveside, the clergyman is finishing the service, and Agatha goes home. And she goes home with a cousin of hers who says, I'll stay with you, because Agatha is single. She's unmarried, and so her mother was like the last person in her world, and sadly she's gone. So this cousin comes and stays with her for a bit, and then the cousin leaves. And Agatha is now living this very lonely life that she's never lived before. She's always, had someone there, but now she's experiencing loneliness for the first time, and this battle between loneliness and grief. And she battles with it so much that actually she thinks of her childhood invisible friend called Clarissa. And this was, a girl that she played with, and they had adventures together when, she was like 10, 11 years old sort of thing, because she was an only child and had a nice upbringing, but was, again, lonely as a child. So that's where Clarissa came from. And so in this time of loneliness, again, who comes back? Clarissa. And Clarissa comes back to Agatha, and Agatha can see her because it's her invisible friend. But then things start to happen, and Clarissa doesn't become invisible anymore. She becomes a being in an entity, an actual physical being in which not just Agatha can see Clarissa, everyone can see Clarissa. And so Agatha starts to panic, and she's like, okay, we're going to go away. And so they go away on holiday and they fix this plan, and they come back, and the plan that they say is that Clarissa is Edith's adopted child, and essentially she is Edith's own child. She is a love child because Agatha is in her 30s, but Clarissa is still that child. So she is old enough to be her mother, and that's where I'm kind of going to leave it for you. I'm sure you know by now, I do love these series of books, and I've read every single one of them and will continue to read every single one of them, because not only do I find authors that I never knew existed before and, often love their work, or, new works by said authors that I fall in love with, but also it pushes my boundaries a bit, because had you said to me a really broad synopsis of this book, that this was a bit on the supernatural side, a little bit fantasy, I'd have gone, I'm not quite sure if that's me. But let me tell you, this book was a bit of me. I loved it because the supernatural, this whole invisible friend coming back to life, it's so much more than that, and it's just so beautifully written. And I love the balance that we have of this kind of lonely child and then this lonely adult and needing someone there, and up pops Clarissa, and it's just wonderful. The writing is exquisite, as a lot of these British Library Women Writers series books are, and I need to read you a little snippet just so you can see how wonderful it is. So the bit that I'm going to read you is probably about halfway through the story. The story itself is just shy of 140 pages. It's a very short story, but it's wonderful. Anyway, the bit that I'm going to read you is from the middle, where they're contemplating going back for another holiday. When autumn came, they returned to the hotel at Brighton for a fortnight of sea air, but they made no new acquaintances and never spoke to the other guests. But as they walked together, they were full of animated talk, absorbed in each other, regardless of the world about them. People often wondered what they could find to talk about, that solitary woman and child. No one guessed the stirring adventures through which they lived their acting games which filled their days. They were in a boundless world full of people of their own choosing. I love that. I think that is just so beautiful. And the writing of the mundane, everyday stuff, so them going to have tea in the garden or just going for a stroll around the beautiful flowers, talking about how a hat moves in a wind. It's all lovely, and it's such a wonderful, wonderful book. And what can I say? But other than that, I loved it. Now, as I said, this book is just shy of 140 pages, but this book is actually a bit longer than that, because at the end we have writings by Edith herself, and she talks about different aspects of her life. So she talks about the death of her sister and then becoming a writer in her 50s to write this. This was her first book. She also talks about becoming a land girl as well. And another aspect that she discusses is her time at university, which I loved. And I have to read you a little bit of this as well, because I think it's so charming and funny and sweet, and the way she talks about university is with such humour and admiration, and I just love it. So this is her little 2 cents of her time at university. The life lived by women university students was a great surprise to me, as my ideas of a women's college were derived from Tennyson's Princess. Here was no Rosebud Garden of Girls. Instead, I found a lot of young women who seemed to look upon their Oxford years as merely the prelude to a troublesome examination, which would in turn be the prelude to a life of a schoolmistress. I just think it's funny and charming, and I enjoyed the extra writings as much as I enjoyed The Love Child, which was just fantastic. As someone who was going into it a little bit unsure, but very much open-minded, because these series are always fantastic, aren't they? They're always top-notch. Place your trust in them, honestly. Every single book of this series that I've read, there's never been a dud. I've loved them all. You can tell that every single one is chosen, and they're chosen for a specific reason. And I love it. And The Love Child was just wonderful. It's a book that, you can very happily just sit and read on a weekend afternoon with a cup of hot chocolate and some lovely classical music on in the background, and it's just wonderful and such a gorgeous, gorgeous read with lots of imagination running through my head as I read it, and I just enjoyed it so thoroughly. So if you want to get your hands on a copy of The Love Child, I leave a link for the British Library shop in the description box below, so go and check this one out, and of course there's a bunch of others as well published by them, so go and check that out. And thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have read this book, if this book's on your wish list. I'd love to know, and I shall see you soon for my next video. Bye for now.